I'm endlessly fascinated and curious about the world around us, about business, about politics, about the arts, about culture, developments, social issues, and the people. Most importantly, about the people that are shaping our future. Every night, I get the opportunity to have conversations, to dive into conversations with thought leaders, with change makers, entrepreneurs, politicians, and everyday heroes who unpack the ideas and stories that I think matter to all of us. What's the future of our economy? What's the future of our country? How do we build stronger communities? What can we learn from music, theater, sports, politics, the arts? How does policy shape our real lives? What does leadership look like, real leadership in today's environment? If it's interesting and relevant and topical and we're talking about it, you'll hear about it here at 6 o'clock on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I want to have real conversations, in-depth conversations. These are ideas we're sharing. This is the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Thanks for joining me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So the assassination of Charlie Kirk has really created a huge storm of comments on social media, and I'm probably, around dinner tables and coffee pots and water coolers and at different coffee shops, etc. On both sides, if not, frankly, more than both sides of the issues. And an individual who I've had the pleasure of interviewing a couple times before, Beth Sturdevant from Ottawa, who is a coach and does a lot of things to try to talk to people about, finding their inner self and their courageous inner self, has written a couple of posts that are really quite interesting and has created numerous different comments in response to her comments on Facebook and social media about talking about this issue and talking about this issue on both sides. And so I thought it'd be really interesting to chat with Beth about why she made this post and what some of the responses have been and why she wanted to get involved in something that some people think is political, some people think is religious, some people think is racist, some people think is, sort of obvious. Beth, why'd you get involved in this whole process?
Honestly, Brian, there's just a feeling that it needs to happen. For myself, I have remained, pretty quiet in my views. I read and see a lot of people's opinions and in my practice as a healer, I hold space for all perspectives, all opinions, all walks of life. And that's fundamentally what I believe everyone should do. However, this situation feels different in that the conversation often tends to be one-sided, or at least there's more suppression. And I myself have not felt comfortable or courageous enough in speaking up and speaking out because of the attacks and the labels and all of the misunderstandings that happened oftentimes on social media. Because, I mean, how can we really go into dialogue and actual conversation on social media? And, people extract things and misinterpret things, and their emotions are extremely high. And so they might read what you say and filter it through their emotions and then interpret it in a different way. So it's a very volatile place, the World Wide Web. And so I have been very cautious, but it just doesn't feel right to be silent anymore. And so
I want to quote,
decided,
if I could, apologize for interrupting, but I want to quote, if I could, from your post, because I think it puts what you're saying in an interesting perspective, and people will get a good sense of what you said, why you said it, and some of what I'm going to ask you about next, which is what some of the reactions were. Quote, "No good comes from talking about these things online," someone recently said to me. And while fundamentally I agree with them in that social media is not a space for calm, open-minded, respectful discussions, in fact, it often does the opposite in creating a false sense of security in our abilities to fan the flames of discourse from the safety of our screens. I do feel like it can be an opportunity to help us gather information, listen objectively to others' opinions, and explore our thoughts in our own way. So what you're saying is that sometimes it's certainly not a place for calm, open-minded, respectful discussions, but you want that opportunity to express your point of view and see what people say. Is that the case?
Yes. For me, what I enjoy is listening to what the whys and hows of what people think. Um, I use that information to then kind of go into my own spaces and into my own time and integrate that information so that I can make my own opinions and formulate my own thoughts. But in this time and age where everything's so reactive and immediate, we don't have a chance to really process our feelings and our thoughts, and so we're very reactive. And social media is an outlet for that reactivity. And so um, I think, being able to share your thoughts should be welcomed without feeling like you're going to be attacked or demonized for it. And interestingly enough, Brian, I, over the months and years, read posts from friends of things that I don't agree with, and thoughts and opinions and attacks on people, political or socially or whatever. And I never say anything. I never think negatively about them. I really kind of listen to them objectively and just allow them to have that space to express themselves without imposing my thoughts and smearing what they're saying. But interestingly enough, I don't get that same respect. So when I post for the first time last night about something controversial like this, I mean, the amount of friends that have unfriended me, the amount of accusations I have, the amount of, all of that stuff, usually from, and I hate sides, I don't believe in sides, one particular side of this equation, um, is quite disappointing, I have to say, because why should I be giving space and compassion and understanding for others if I cannot receive the same in return?
Why did people unfriend you?
Because now I'm the enemy, because now they assume that my views are, because now they assume I am a right-wing Republican, that I agree with everything Charlie says, that now I'm an oppressor, now I'm racist. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, who knows why? But now I've become a threat. And I used to think like that back in the day. I was raised in a very liberal arts family. And you start to kind of look at other people who don't believe the same things that you do as threats, and it just changes your perspective, and you're just weary of them. And so now I've become that for other people. And so rather than questioning or trying to understand or reaching out to me and having a conversation, it's just easier to silence me.
So it's interesting that you've got on your comments all points of view, and it's interesting that as I read through them, some people very critical of the individual, and others very supportive. And so maybe they've unfriended you after the fact, but there's lots of people that have made those comments, and have quoted other people and have posted videos and given you source material, etc. So you did get some respectful replies.
Absolutely. I did, yeah, which is wonderful. I really was welcoming in that post last night that I that I shared. I was really looking for, objective, I guess, evidence of sorts that would help me to better understand their perspectives as to why they feel Charlie Kirk is a Nazi, why they're calling him a fascist, why they think he's a racist, all these things that I myself haven't heard when I've listened to him speak, and I have listened to him in many debates. I'm curious. I want to know. Maybe there's things that I haven't heard or perspectives that I haven't seen. And I appreciate, a lot of people have actually reached out to me outside of social media to thank me for having the courage to speak up, to bring a voice to this, and also sharing my sentiments of fear in doing so. So, yeah.
So, what do you think about the people that took a different point of view? And you said one person said, I think watching the edited version of the Cambridge debate is probably better than the one on Kirk's channel. This was not a thoughtful person seeking out conversation on the issues of the day. He is a zealot that is constantly talking over the people that he is debating in rapid fire manner, etc., etc. How do you feel about, this person gave you a post that was extremely long and detailed in response to your comments?
I actually didn't see that comment because there's so many, and you don't. Facebook doesn't always tell you when somebody comments. My response to that is, I mean, maybe in one debate he's like that, or a few, but there's also many other debates or conversations he's had where other people speak over him and shout at him, and he's extremely calm and gives them the space and actually tells other people who are shouting and trying to interrupt the conversation to give them space and allow them to talk. So, I mean, yeah, maybe he's done that a couple times. I don't know, but should I judge somebody or judge you on your worst day and your worst moments in life and say that's who you are forever? No, but I should at least be open to listening and seeing different perspectives and different um, um, you know situations that might show you otherwise. Yeah.
He, someone else said the opposite. Every time I've ever heard him speak or debate, he brought up facts, stats, data, literature, verbatim scripture. He generally spoke to everyone with kindness and open mind and encouraged to talk about difficult topics to talk about, especially with people that had strong opinions. So, it is interesting to me as I read through your post and the comments that you got. You got what you actually wanted, which was that sort of respectful debate and different points of view from different people. Now, maybe the people that unfriended you were more nasty, and those comments are gone. But you got both sides of the issue presented to you on your comments, and I thought it was interesting reading through. So you really do have friends, it would appear, across the political spectrum.
Absolutely, I do. And that's the kind of person I am. Like I said, I'm extremely open-minded. I I hold the space of love, basically, and I don't judge people for their thoughts, whether I agree with them or not. I really appreciate understanding how things come into how people, form their beliefs. And oftentimes we don't even understand why we believe what we believe. So talking about them and talking through them and having this safe space to explore our thoughts really allows us to sometimes kind of bring air to our differences and help us see with clearer eyes. And that's what, obviously I started to do that on Facebook with my post, which is wonderful. Because I do not have patience for people who are vicious and attack others, even people I'm opposed to ethically. But yeah, so I think it was good, and it is a scary place to be in for sure. Um, but it feels right to be going down this path and at least talking openly about
I
these things.
I agree with you, and I encourage you, and I encourage others to have these conversations because I think it is a very difficult situation that particularly the United States is, but I think in Canada as well, because we've become so polarized and living in echo chambers of only people that believe what we believe and think the way we think. And I think that as lots of people have talked about, these algorithms and social media tend to give us posts that are self-fulfilling our current belief system and accentuating it and adding to it rather than necessarily the opposite point of view. And so I think that posts like yours are helpful where you're actually asking for information. And I did find it interesting reading through some of the comments that were really expressing very different points of view and opposite points of view, but doing so in respectful is, I think, the right word, but it's also just a sort of a factual representation of what that person believes and what they got out of listening to the individual. And then you quote Bill Maher, and you say what he said is too many people think that to prove you wrong is to eliminate you altogether. And I think that is part of the problem today is that too many of us are so wedded to our beliefs that we almost have to destroy the other person, the other side of you, rather than just sort of listen to it. We don't have to agree to it, but listening to it is beneficial.
It's true. Absolutely. I said to somebody, I said, you don't need to mourn or agree with Charlie Kirk or even anybody that you have opposing views with, but you do need to hold space and show grace to the people who do. That's the problem, is that we lose all humanity in our ability to expect or accept, I should say, that other people don't think and believe what we do, and that's okay. Where it becomes a problem is when we take our beliefs and now we impose it onto others. And that's difficult because we live in a very complex society where we all share space and we all have to, live together. And it's not a simple black and white situation. But, if I say I believe this and now, Brian, now you need to believe that and you don't believe it. Well, therefore, I'm going to impose that on you and I'm going to take away your rights and I'm going to da, 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 da. Like that's where it really starts to become extremely problematic. And I don't really know what the answer is, to be honest.
Well, I think it
Other
is
conversations.
posts like yours that are welcoming of different points of view and encouraging people to have a discussion. So let's take a break for some messages, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and see how you respond and see if we can have a respectful debate, discussion about some of these issues. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes with Beth Sturdevant from Ottawa, who is a coach and a healer that really is all about openness and being authentic and finding your inner confidence and your inner warrior. I think is what you've called some of your the courses that you provide. And I think you've described yourself as being progressive in a lot of things historically, and now influenced by Kirk and some of his statements. And so it'll be an interesting discussion. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got Beth Sturdevant with us today. And Beth has made a couple of posts in the last couple of days about the assassination of Charlie Kirk and wondering about his policies and why some people are so positive toward Charlie Kirk and why other people are so negative to Charlie Kirk. And I think, off the bat, I should say that, I think that violence of any kind, but particularly assassination, murder is completely inappropriate. And so I think that, I think hopefully everyone can agree to that. You talked about mourning. I think that some people have called the sort of the situation right that you should clearly feel empathy for the victim's family, for the death of anyone that's contributing to public discourse and their community in any way that they think is appropriate. At the same time, you don't have to celebrate them if you disagree with them, and so that there is a difference between mourning or showing appropriate human empathy versus celebrating and what someone might say. So let's talk about some of the issues. A lot of the issues that Charlie Kirk talked about were in regards to the role of females, and he had what some people would describe as a fairly traditional view of the role of females, and that females should obey their husband, as is sort of he quotes scripture in that regard, and be a more subservient and rear children, raise children. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I understand, given the fact that he was such a devout Christian, where his perspective comes from. I mean, that makes sense why he would feel and believe those things. I mean, I've been a single mother for 18 years. I raised my two boys on my own. And I have to say, it wasn't by choice. I was kind of thrown into that situation, and being the independent and strong woman that I am, I put my all into that, and I did the best I could with what I had. That being said, I would not have chosen that life, and I do not think that children should be raised in single parent households. I do kind of seeing the way that society is, well, children will say the way that children are becoming more violent and more dependent upon their devices, and there's a lack of real solid parenting and commitment. I would say there's a lack of commitment and dedication to family that part of me kind of, I'll say, agrees with him. And I know people are going to twist that. But what I mean in that is that I really think it's important to have that solid family foundation with a male role model and a female role model. That could be, in whatever context that could be, I personally believe that what we need is to come together as a community, right? Having living in these separate homes and um, these separate lives is not healthy for anybody, especially our children. But until we come back to that system where we're all living in a community, in a communal setting where we start helping each other and help raise our children, I think having some type of a solid family. I mean, I personally would never want lots of children. I am not subservient to anybody. Uh, but I understand and I kind of agree that having somebody at home taking care of the family, whether that's a man, if that's what he actually wants, or a woman, I think it would be healthy for our children and for our families and for society down the road. Yeah.
So, one side of the issue is that he has a biblical attitude, a traditional values attitude, a more historic attitude toward the more traditional role of females. Another point of view would be that he's racist, not racist, I apologize, that he's misogynistic and believes in sort of male superiority. When does one become okay and the other become inappropriate in your mind?
Honestly, I can't really speak to his views on women because I haven't really heard him speak other than his views on having a wife and having lots of children and continuing to have large families and a wife that stays at home or puts at least her family ahead of her career. I don't really like titles, and I don't like the title misogyny. I feel like that's it's a slippery slope. I really do not agree with like titles and labels and things like that. But honestly, if that's what he believes and his wife's okay with it, and what harm does it do? And his children are happy and they're happy. I don't really see a problem with that, so long as they're not enforcing it on everybody.
Well, I guess that's the issue is that, some people think he was trying to enforce it with some of his policies on everyone. But it's interesting that, traditional values can be very positive to some people and other people can take a look at that same. And I've interviewed people and you and I've talked about this before. Some people think that women's liberation may have taken things too far, and people that wanted to be feminine and feel feminine and have a life raising children felt they were ostracized from society and weren't allowed to have that kind of an opportunity.
Mm.
And we're sad that that opportunity was looked down upon, they perceived by society. And then other people think, no, equality of opportunity, equality, women's rights, equal pay for equal value, the Me Too movement, the sexual revolution, all that kind of stuff was incredibly positive, and was way past the time that we should have achieved all those things. So it's interesting. Okay, let's talk about another issue. Charlie Kirk, from I understand, equated abortion with murder. And again, he quoted scripture in that regard. And that's certainly his attitude toward his own family and his own people, but he wanted to enforce that belief on the rest of society. Is that right or wrong?
Well, I don't think you should enforce it on anybody. However, yeah, I mean, I do not agree with his views on abortion, but I really appreciate hearing them. I really appreciate hearing why he feels what he does, and he makes some valid points. I mean, again, because he's such a Christian man, of course he's opposed to abortion, and in their views, you're killing life. Life begins at conception. So yeah, it's murder. In my belief system, in the shamanism that I've been trained in, the spirit doesn't enter into the embryo until 30 days after conception. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in there, obviously. But I've also heard him Charlie Kirk compare abortion to at least the number of abortions per year to the number of deaths in the Holocaust. And people tend to, obviously, because that's a very sensitive subject and tragic period in human history. And he's not comparing it. He's not saying it's worse in the Holocaust. He's just saying the numbers are worse as far as the deaths, according to the fact that, in his views and biblical understanding of abortion, you're killing lives. And so I can understand his perspective while I don't agree with it, because I do feel like there are some circumstances where sometimes abortions are warranted. It's a very hot debate for sure, and something that I don't think people are really going to ever agree on.
I hope you're wrong. I hope that people will agree on it eventually. And so I do think that you're right that talking about it is critically important, because I think that some people, um, have one point of view and will only listen to that one point of view, and people have an extreme other point of view and will only, listen to that extreme point of view. And the best example that I've heard is that the vast majority of right wing people in the United States that say that they are anti-abortion actually on numerous occasions would actually agree with abortion, and they use the examples of rape, particularly if they ever describe a rape of your own daughter. Would you agree with abortion, or incest? I apologize. And when the death of the mother is at risk, and often when it's very early on in a pregnancy, and you've talked about that, and then also people talk about pregnancies that end naturally, and is that death, or is that just a pregnancy that ended with a miscarriage? And I had two children that were miscarried, and we were sad, but we didn't treat it like it was a funeral. And there was not a birth certificate, and there wasn't a death of a child in my mind and in my religious belief. But were we sad? Yes, we were very sad. And then on the other side of things, that I think a lot of the polls have suggested, and a lot of the studies and focus groups that have been done, say the vast majority, if not almost all, Democrats, even if they say abortion should always be legal, wouldn't feel terribly comfortable with an abortion in the last trimester. And so therefore, when we go to these extremes of life begins at conception, or life begins at birth, maybe those extremes aren't helpful. And maybe actually talking it through and talking about the different points of view, such that, maybe we'd come to some sort of a agreement in the middle, and or leave it a little bit to a woman's right to choose, or based on a doctor's advice, or some combination thereof, particularly if it's in the middle, and realize that, as you said a couple of minutes ago, it's muddy. It's something that really people should think about in their own circumstances, and for what's right for them, rather than imposing views on the rest of society. Let me raise another issue. Actually, do you have a response to that?
No, I agree with what you say. And yeah, I mean, it would be lovely if the conversations about abortion brought us into a more kind of common solution. But, people who are, very Christian or very Catholic, and believe in the tenets of the Bible, that's law, right? So I think, again, I think it comes down to just showing grace and allowing people the space to make decisions for themselves individually, that's going to be best for them in their lives, because everybody's different, and the circumstances are different as well, of course. So I think conversation is wonderful always, but yeah, I certainly would love if we could find a solution on that, for sure.
Let me raise another issue with you: racism. So Charlie Kirk has been criticized by some of being racist. He has criticized affirmative action programs. He has criticized that some people, including one member of the U.S. Supreme Court, that he says got their job only because they weren't white. And he's been very critical of some of the sort of the diversity, equity, and inclusion rules and other things in the United States, particularly obviously that have helped what other people would call marginalized communities and people of color and people that have historically not had the opportunities that white people have had. Some people have called that racism. Other people have called it anti-woke and reasonable. How do you feel about that?
Um, that's a tough one because it is such an emotional subject for sure. I have not heard anything that I feel that he said is racist, but I'm not a Charlie Kirk expert and I haven't heard everything. So there might be. But what I have heard him speak about is his views on DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And his belief that people should be hired and treated on the merit of their abilities, right? What they're capable of, what they do, who they are, not by what they are. And I agree with that. I really do. And if you think about like in a symphony orchestra, when you audition for a major symphony orchestra, all of the auditions are behind screens. And while it's terrifying because it is, all they're doing is, nitpicking everything, right? I mean, this is the highest of highest levels of playing, but it's to prevent the ability to hire based on what they look like, who they are, instead on how they play. And I do agree with that. And I do agree with his views on that, to a certain degree, as much as I know. But I haven't heard him say much about racism. I have heard and seen people speak about, people of other races talk about how inclusive he was towards them, how he helped them, how he supported them, how he gave them opportunities that they otherwise didn't have. So, I mean, and I also heard a clip of him speaking and against a very overtly, very, I'll say, aggressive racist who was arguing with Charlie and trying to defend his views. And Charlie was very opposed to what he was saying and making very fair points as to, well, how can you be a Republican when there's people of color in the Republican Party? How can you, he was really challenging this person. And I don't think somebody that's fundamentally racist is going to do those things. He might have strong opinions in some areas, like in the DEI, but it's not based on race. It's based on the quality of and the character of a person.
He was also been criticized for being anti-homosexual and anti people that are trans that are identifying as a sex different than what they were born biologically. And again, I think he uses scripture as the justification for that belief that homosexuality is a sin and wrong, and that gay marriage is wrong, and that trans and accepting people that are going to transition from one sex to another is wrong. How do you feel all about that? Is that appropriate or not?
Well, coming from his scripture and the Bible, I guess it would be appropriate. However, I've also heard him speak to gays and lesbians and saying that they're people of children of God, and so he respects and loves them too. He doesn't agree. He believes that a man and a woman are what should be in a marriage, in a Christian marriage, but I've never heard him specifically say anything against any gays and lesbians. Now, the trans community, yeah, he questions their perspectives and their choices, but he also supports what I really appreciated hearing him say, specifically with this one trans woman, was, kind of asking her, why are you doing this to your body? And just kind of giving her a platform to really explore her reasons why. And maybe instead of, immediately coming to a decision, or the answers that she normally gives. She's really started to kind of dissect it and go into it a little bit more deeper with him. And so there was a nice conversation and a nice dialogue, and it wasn't oppressive in any way. It was really open, and I really appreciated hearing both of their perspectives and sides. So he might have his opinions, but I don't think that he's denying anybody the ability to be themselves if that's what makes them happy.
So this is an interesting conversation. I really appreciate you joining us and talking about it. And I think that your post was excellent. And it was wonderful reading some of the comments of the different points of view. Probably one of the best podcasts I ever heard of Charlie Kirk was when he was on Governor Gavin Newsom's podcast, Governor of California. One was very progressive, may in fact be the Democratic nominee for president in the upcoming next federal election, assuming we have one in the United States, and Charlie Kirk. And the fact that the two of them sat down for a long period of time and discussed a whole slew of very important issues comparable to the way that we've discussed them today, and put forward their points of view, put forward their facts, put forward their background, I think was really helpful. And then also that, Gavin Newsom talked about how Charlie Kirk had motivated his son Gavin Newsom's son, to become more involved in politics and political discourse, even if he disagreed with Charlie Kirk, I think is really helpful. And that's one of the things that Charlie Kirk did, is that he made people think. And I think that's good. Whether you agree or disagree with him, I think that's good. I think and I've been criticized for this, is I think one of the big mistakes that Justin Trudeau, our former prime minister, made is that he didn't go meet with the trucker convoy people in Ottawa. And a lot of people thought the trucker convoy people were wrong. And there's a case in the courts in Ottawa going on right now in regards to whether what they were doing was legal or not. But the polls said that 15% of Canadians agreed with their policies, their point of view in regards to vaccine mandates and mask mandates and things like that. And 15% is not a majority. 15% isn't everybody. 15%, wouldn't get elected to the House of Commons. Huge amount of people, but it's a couple million people. And when a couple million people believe something, I think you should sit down and listen to them and find out what they're all about. And I think the fact that we didn't listen to them, and we didn't give them an opportunity to speak, and we didn't give them representation in the House of Commons, were one of the reasons why they protested the way they did and had the convoy that they did, or some people would call it an occupation. And I think that's the key, is to listen to people. And some people have criticized that he would, take a very oppositional manner. He would rapid fire answers. He would quote scriptures. He wouldn't give people a chance to answer. Well, maybe, but he did sit down with them and invited them to speak and listened and all sides of view. And so I think that he created discussion. And I think that's what we need more of, is exactly the way you've described it. Frank, honest, open, respectful discussion, rather than treating the person as the enemy. And one of the other examples I'll give you, I think it was during the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009, and we talked about how all political parties got together and supported a bill to support banks and fiscal stimulus. And they came together from different points of view, and they said, in Canada, when we disagree, we're competitors, but we're not enemies. And I think that's the key, is that we should compete with ideas and debate and respectful discussion, but we shouldn't be enemies. We should be like the two hockey teams that fight like crazy when they're on the ice, but when the game's over, they shake hands. And you know what? A month later, they might be on the same team for Team Canada or Team USA. And so thinking about us as competitors in public opinion or on the field or on the rink, and not enemies, I think is key, and having that respectful discussion. And so, Beth, I really appreciate. Before we close, tell us all what you do. You're a coach and a healer, and you've got these sessions on finding your inner warrior. What do you do?
That's a good question. I kind of say I'm an artist, right? So I work in the healing arts, but I'm also a cellist. So really, in both cases, it's kind of harmonizing life, harmonizing, through my music, but also harmonizing people. So what do I do as a healer? It's basically therapy that gets into the subconscious mind and finds out why people think and do and believe the things they do, and so that we can at least have conscious understanding and make better choices for ourselves. Um, yeah, I'm trained in shamanism and spiritual healing, and we call it energy medicine. So I kind of use a combination of all of those when I'm working with my clients. I do run a retreat for women where I take them to the Adirondacks and we go hiking, and uh, really give them that opportunity to kind of push themselves physically, but then we also do some meditations, and we really have a great time as well. So that's something I really enjoy doing, and we'll
If,
probably do more in the
if
future.
people want to check out your coaching or your retreats or some of your courses, how do they best do that?
They can look at my website, bethsturdevant.com, and I try to keep it as updated as I can, but I'm not a huge fan of the internet, so.
Beth, I really thank you for coming on tonight, and I thank you for your post, and I encourage you to keep on it, even if you get some people that unfriend you. And I hope people will respectfully read the comments and your posts, and and participate in the discussion, because I think that having the discussion is the key. And if we're not going to listen to each other, and if we're not going to talk to each other, and if we're not going to seek to understand before we seek to be understood, is that what was it 1 Minute Manager pitched at one point in time? How are we going to have a community? I think that
Mm.
that's the key, and so I really appreciate the discussion. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian, and for welcoming it.
We're going to take a final break, and I'm going to come back with a couple of my own thoughts in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. Back in two. Beth, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.